Hey everyone, welcome to Handing the Shame Back, a channel dedicated to the amazing adult survivors out across the world. I'm so pleased to have you here, and for those of you who have joined us in the last week, I'm very honoured to have you as part of this. We know that child sexual abuse is a massive phenomena in our world, and we know the silence is deafening. So this is one small attempt at breaking through. I would like to issue a trigger warning for those who know this show. You'll understand if you, for any reason, listen to our next guest and feel triggered or unsafe at all, please do stop watching. Go to the show notes below and you'll be directed to some guidance and resource. So I've got a fabulous guest today. I'm very excited to bring John Callas to you. And John is with us all the way from LA, California, about a mile from the beach. I'm not going to talk about the temperature because it just makes me so jealous. But in the meantime, let me tell you a little bit about John. He's a 40-year vet film maker, producer. He's also done many things within that space. And as well as that, he's a survivor of child sexual abuse. And he's also an author. And we're going to discuss all of that very shortly. But in the meantime, welcome to you, John.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Gloria.
Awesome. So look, it's just wonderful to have made the connection and have you on the show. And I think for our survivors watching, it's so important that we hear from people across the board. So I'm delighted that you agreed to do this with me today. I guess, as with all guests, John, we tend to start kind of at the beginning. How old you were, what was happening for you around the time of your child sexual abuse.
Well, my dad died when I was 3, and it sent me into a lot of phases of abandonment, eventually some deep depression. I started acting up, getting out of control. I was kind of a street kid. And right around, I'm going to say around 11, 12 years old, my sister's friend had stopped by and um, she was the one that asked me to go to the bedroom with her, and I didn't understand why. She made up some excuse about a purse or something. And when we got there, she closed the door and put me on the bed and sat on top of me and proceeded to trying to rape me basically. And she may have succeeded if the doorbell hadn't rang. So I was really thankful my friend came over and managed to stop that process. And I never saw the woman again. I just didn't want anything to do with her. But it did leave some questionable scars about how I was going to have a healthy sex life after that.
Yeah, of course, because as a child of 11, you're either pre-pubescent or at puberty, and it can become very confusing and I guess feelings of powerlessness or what to do emerged in you. What did you notice you felt? Was it fear? Was it?
I think it was a lot of fear. It was very emasculating because she was using the, oh, aren't you a man? Haven't you been with a woman? Don't you like women and all this? And this kind of set a tone for me to be really afraid and not really trusting of women because it scared me. I was so young and I was not at the point where I was understanding my own sexuality, let alone that. And then by the time I got to military school, I thought, oh no, this isn't happening again. And unfortunately, the headmaster had a liking for me. So he started making overtures and sitting on my bed and rubbing my leg. And I ran away from school a lot of times because of it. So even though he never accomplished his feat, that got me even more conflicted because now I have a woman attacking me and now I have a man attacking me, and I'm sitting thinking, I don't know what to do with all these feelings because I'm lost. I mean, I didn't know.
And John, I'm so sorry that was your experience. And for our beautiful survivors watching, you will be able to relate because some of you were equally at a school when this occurred, and also for some of you amazing male survivors, you were also abused by females. So John, what a conflicting, confusing, horrible time. And I guess I'm interested how old you were when the headmaster started, I guess, grooming you and then being sexually um, abusive towards you.
I was sent away at 12 years old in military school, and I think it was about 13 years old when he started his whole campaign. And that was a really good, clever way of saying it. He was beginning to groom me because he had one of the boys come up and say, he really likes you, and we have this group that goes camping, and so why don't you go camping with us? And I thought, get off campus in the woods, makes sense. But when I saw what he was doing with another boy in another tent, I zipped up the sleeping bag and put it over my head, and I just shook the whole night. I just praying he wasn't going to come in and try anything with me. So
Oh,
about 13 years old.
John, that's awful. And I guess the fear and the fact that you know, tried to run away many times says so much. Just if I may, you know, you've raised a couple of things already that I think are going to be of real benefit to our audience, and one of them is around, having been abused by both a man and a woman. Um, it it then puts you into a feeling, I guess, of how was the trust there for you with either sex at that point at age 13?
Yeah, I was conflicted. I had, at that point, I had a stepfather, but I wasn't close enough to start bringing up these type of topics. There really wasn't any help at military school or private school for that matter for mental health. So I'm stuck with all of these questions and thoughts and feelings and nobody to talk to. So I just kept getting more and more depressed. I mean, it was just one thing after another. And, after a while, your brain can't handle, well, I shouldn't say yours, but my brain couldn't process all of what I was going through, and I fell apart. So, yeah.
Was there anyone, in your life at home? I know obviously you had a sister, um, other siblings, mum, anyone who wondered what was going on or you felt you could trust to share this with?
That's a double-edged sword because by the time I was 12 years old, I was so out of control that the court gave my mother a choice, either send me to military school or they were going to send me to reform school. So my mother and then my stepdad, who became my father, um, were in a position that they had to make that kind of a decision. So their focus was on behavioral things that because I was acting out. And back then, there wasn't really much in the way of trying to figure out what a kid's going through because they were trying to make a living and put food on the table. And so I was left alone and I didn't feel safe enough to even bring it up to my mother or father because my mother grew up, you know, um, post World War II. She had three kids. She was pregnant with a fourth, miscarried at the funeral because my dad died. And we're living in an impoverished neighborhood. And her focus wasn't really on mental health or, oh, how are you feeling, honey? What's going on? I see you having some problems. It was like, why are you misbehaving? I got enough on my plate trying to feed you kids and keep you out of trouble. And so she had her hands full. So there was really no place to go. And that's a dark place to wind up, believe me.
Yeah, of course. And you'd lost dad, and we know that there's two stages through a child's life where they do what we call separation individuation, and one is as a toddler between about 2.5 and 3, and the second is when you reach puberty, so it can be anything from 11 to 12.5. Now, interestingly, those are the times when you naturally, as a child or adolescent, need to find who you are and you're trying to emerge. But if you've lost a person, as in your beautiful dad at that first stage, it would have felt rudderless. And then, of course, your second stage for this was you then lost mum because you got sent away. What do you feel about that? This is Gloria Masters hypothesizing wildly here, but yeah.
Well, I think the abandonment issue I had with my dad leaving, dying, I mean, it wasn't his choice. He didn't say, I think I'll die today and leave my
Oh,
kid. Got compounded when my mother drove me from New Jersey to New York City, and at 12 years old, put me on a train to go to a military school in Virginia. And as the train pulled out of the station, I saw my mother turn around and walk away. And for years, I hated her for that moment because I thought, great, you're abandoning me. You hate me. You don't love me. I mean, what's going on with you? And it wasn't until I was an adult that we had a heart to heart talk. And she started crying. She said, John, I didn't know what to do. I'm putting my little 12-year-old baby on a train by himself. If I didn't turn around, you would have seen me crying. And I couldn't do that because I knew you needed the help because you were out of control. And so we had a good cry together. And from that moment on, the healing just was amazing. I mean, I felt like I had a mother again. And I
yeah,
felt like I belonged in a family, which I hadn't up until that point.
yeah. Wow. And just to think all those years of holding on to how you had been feeling, and for mum unable to say to you, hey, this is what I had been thinking, just caused so much more angst, I guess, over that time. Um, yeah. So, when you consider what you experienced and the confusion around it, and then that you were so far from home, what did you, what help? Were there any adults around you at military school that were there or approachable or supportive in any way?
It's the first year I got there, I was walking by the kitchen with my arm loaded with all of the military uniforms that was required. And an African American gentleman came out and he saw me sitting down with this load of clothing. He says, first year student? I said, first day too. He goes, my name's Otis. I said, I'm John. And we started talking. He went in, came out, he gave me an apple, and he became a friend. And we would talk and he'd say, you're a good kid. I can feel you, John. I know there's somebody in there. I know you're scared. Don't let them get to you. They're gonna come at you with everything, and they're gonna find one person to make an example. And it sounds like they picked you. So you're gonna have to find yourself some strength to get around that. You come talk to Otis when you need to. And I gave him a hug. I mean, I never felt that connection with anyone that cared that much about me. So that started it.
Hmm. So you felt you had someone there who you could approach if you wanted to or needed to.
Yes, and for me, it felt like the first person in my life that actually listened and understood what I was going through
Yeah.
and empathized. The man had amazing empathy. And unfortunately, the second year I went looking for Otis at the end of the year, I wanted to talk to him. And one of the cooks handed me a letter and Otis told me all these things about how good I was and I keep my nose straight and he's going to miss me. And I looked at the other guy and I said, did Otis quit or anything? He goes, John, Otis passed away last night. Right away, back into the abandonment. Yet another person um, leaves me, and I just couldn't get it through my head that it wasn't anything to do with me, that it was their path and their journey, and it had nothing to do with me. But I took it really personal that he abandoned me. And I didn't feel bad that he abandoned me. It's just the concept that I was being abandoned once again.
Well, because and grief does that, doesn't it? What you're grieving for, the loss of Otis, brings up any other loss you've ever had, whether it's conscious or not. So to survivors watching this, of course, that's going to be the same for each one of us. And when you've had a loss or you're triggered, it will bring up everything for you, just because that's how our minds work. And I guess, sorry.
It um, it got to the point after military school um, where I was so lost that by the time I hit 15 years old, I had it. I couldn't stand the voices in my head anymore. I couldn't stand how I felt about life. So I literally walked down the end of the dock to a half frozen lake and I jumped in. And I wanted to kill myself. I just wanted it to stop. But when the water rushed into my lungs, I just felt like this is not what I want to do. I don't want to die. I need to figure something out. And I got out of the water. And then a coach came up to me and said, how come you're not playing sports? And I said, oh, I don't play sports. And he goes, well, didn't your dad and you go play sports like baseball or anything? And I just put my head down. And he sat down next to me. And he said, what's going on? I said, nothing. He goes, tell me, what's going on, John? So he got the story of my dad out of me. And he said, let me teach you how to play soccer. I said, why would you do that? He says, well, be honest with you, school's kind of small and we need players. and it sounds like you could use a little sports in your life. He opened up an interesting door for me because I found a place I could put my anger and my aggression on the field. And then my chemistry teacher found out I was playing soccer, so he made me wrestle in exchange for tutoring me in chemistry. And then the ice hockey coach asked if I ever skated, and I said, "Oh yeah, we used to skate all the time." He says, "All right, you're on the ice hockey team," and I was a defenseman and I just got wild so I can knock people over. I was having a great time. And in wrestling, I got all of my aggression so out of me that I literally became undefeated in the Tri-State Championship in New England. Uh, and it was a place for me to process some anger.
And what a powerful way to do it, and how safe. And you know what you're saying without even maybe realizing it is, here's another male role model stepping up to assist.
Yeah. You know, Gloria, I have to share this with you because I think it's important. My sister had a lesbian friend that I really liked. And she said one night, she goes, you want to go in the city and go to a club? I said, yeah, let's go. She goes, it's a gay club. I said, what exactly does that mean? Am I obligated to do anything? No, no, no. Nobody's going to bother you. It's a safe environment. It's just I'm going to be dancing with girls and you can hang out at the bar and blah, blah, blah. I said, okay. So we're there. We danced a couple of dances and then she went off and I sat at the bar. And this guy sat next to me and said, you want to dance? And I looked and I smiled. I said, I'm sorry. And he looked, he goes, you're straight, aren't you? I said, I'm pretty sure I am. Yes. And he sat there for about an hour with me talking. And I had this epiphany. I thought, here's a gay gentleman talking to me where heterosexuals weren't that interested in how I was feeling, what I was doing. I mean, he asked some pretty deep questions, and I told him about military school and the woman. And he goes, I'm really sorry you had to go through that. And he explained some of his experiences and what led him to realizing he was gay. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm I don't know what to make of all this. This is a human being that just showed me so much about feelings. And it was something I was scared of. Gay people scared me because I didn't understand it. And he gave me an opportunity to see people for who they are and not what they do in life or their political views or anything like that. It was pretty monumental, I must say.
Wow. Prior to that, had you already formed an opinion about gay people? Because I know back in those days there was a definite I think underlying it all was a huge fear, John. Would you agree? Because people didn't understand what it was. So rather than trying to understand, they judged it and found it lacking and therefore wrong or evil or whatever ridiculous notion you want to attach to it.
Well, when I was growing up in New Jersey, the gay scene was not really a gay scene. It was really behind closed doors. And I saw a couple of the hoods, with the little waterfall haircuts and greased back hair, um, pick out somebody who was gay and they'd go over and beat him. And I felt the urge to go over and get in the middle and stop it, but I knew I'd get my butt kicked, and um, I chickened out, and I shouldn't have. I should have gone over even if I got my butt kicked and helped the kid, and I didn't. And I'll never forgive myself. Well, I did forgive myself for it, but it made me realize how scared I was of the whole process of being labeled, and I learned to just stay away from it. So I think the lesson for me is that when people are afraid of something, they react in negative ways towards it instead of trying to find out the truth.
And I think that's a general human condition when you're younger. I think as
Mhm.
people get older, hopefully we get a little wiser. I can't speak for you, John, but hopefully we get a little wiser, don't we, audience? We've got to hope something like that happens, and that we find our empathy and our compassion, and realize that what was driving us was fear, not love. Yeah, there's a whole thing, people say the opposite of love is hate. In my opinion, the opposite of love is fear, actually.
Which creates the hate. I mean, we see it in this country now. We're so divisive, and people are hating each other over political views,
Mm.
and that's not right. We're supposed to talk about the views and the platforms of what the politicians are doing, and then make your own decision who you want to vote for, instead of saying, "Oh no, you're voting for him. I hate you because you stand for this and that," and all the name calling. It's very unhealthy. It doesn't accomplish a thing.
Well, it's quite sad, really, and it makes me think that back in the day, some of our audience are far too young, John, but you'll get it. Back in the day, there was this thing: never talk about religion, money, or politics. And I kind of think now I do understand why, because it creates, it can bring out the very worst in people, unfortunately. And, but look, back to you.com, if you were to describe, I mean, for instance, going back to when you were 11 and you had that young woman try to rape you, um, your friend luckily rang the doorbell and arrived at your home. Were you ever able to talk to an adult about that growing up, or was it just considered don't ever speak of it again?
I buried it pretty deep in my psyche. I
Yeah.
didn't want to deal with it. And then one day I woke up realizing I had so many questions and nobody to ask, nowhere to turn. And I thought, somebody told me about this thing called therapy. So I tried therapy for a while, which helped me a lot. And it was in therapy that I finally got to explain what happened to me.
Yeah.
And so the therapist said, "Well, why don't you write, a few pages out about some of these experiences and we'll talk." So I did. And then the third session, I walked in and he just held me and he wouldn't let me go. He said, "I don't know how you made it through life. These 3 pages had me in tears the whole time. I just don't understand how you turned out the way you did." I said, "Well, this is only our third session. Maybe you should hold a judgment on that, and let's get it deeper into it." And then I went from a couple of other therapists because I felt like some therapists can go so far with you, and I felt there was a stoppage and I wasn't getting anything out of it anymore. And then a friend of mine recommended this woman therapist, and I had a couple of sessions with her, and she said, "Why don't you join our group?" And I went, "Oh, no, 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 no. I'm not going to talk about my stuff in front of a group." And she sat there and said, It's okay, but how about this? How about you come to the group? You don't have to say a word, and you just listen." I said, "All right, and I trust you, so I'll do that." So I sat in therapy, and they were going around the room doing their normal rounds. And as I listened, I realized, wow, these people have similar issues, maybe not identical to mine, but they're dealing with the same kind of stuff. And maybe it's okay. And then somebody said, "John, do you want to say anything?" And I looked, I said, uh, "I'm happy to be here." And they all started laughing. And I felt really relaxed after that. And so the next time I opened up a little bit more. And after about a year of that, we all realized we were just happy, neurotic people. It was an interesting turnaround.
Yeah. And it takes such courage, doesn't it, to face into what lies underneath the trauma and how it's impacted our lives. And John, when you think about it, and I have read your book, it it wasn't just the sexual abuse for you. That military school was evil, is one word I would use, in the way they treated you boys, you cadets there. And yeah, I guess I wonder, as you were going through your healing, how you managed to make sense of any of that. And for our audience, they won't understand what I'm referring to. Are you able to share a little, please, about, you were there from the age of 11 to, was it 15?
About 15, yes.
About 4 years, 3.5, 4 years. So yeah,
About three, yeah.
yeah. Are you able to share what your experience was? Only as much as you're comfortable to, of course. Yeah.
No, I'm comfortable. I mean, look, the truth is on the train ride down there, my mother had given one of the cadets money to make sure I got on the right train in Washington, D.C. And so I found a way to get somebody to buy me beer. I got drunk and I started lipping off, and I got in a fight with one of the cadets. And the conductor had to pull us apart. And then the first night at military school, because nobody explained the rules to me or anything, I wound up getting knocked out by the senior people 3 times because I had a mouth on me. Look, arguably, I had a mouth, and it was the only survival tactic that I had, is to pretend I was tough and rough, and you can't mess with me. And well, they did. And they wound up breaking broomsticks over my back. I got whipped with wire hangers, uh, a lot of detention. I think I set a school record for how many demerits you get in the school in the first month. And each demerit meant that we had free time on Saturday, and each demerit represented 1 hour of your free time that you had to either march or do exercise or whatever they deemed they wanted you to do. So for many, 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 many months, I had no free time. So it was just compounding the abandonment with wanting to scream at somebody, which I couldn't, hiding the fact that I had faked a letter from my mother saying I could smoke cigarettes. I mean, it was still spiraling like crazy. And when I finally got out of military school, I thought, oh, good. Even though I'm going over private school, I don't have to wear the uniform. Nobody knows me, blah, blah. First day, a 6'2" guy asked me to show him how to kill himself because he knew I went to military school. And for 3 years, he bullied me. So it was a horrible feeling because I was on the same soccer team with him. And the third year I was there, I was nominated as co-captain. And he stood up and said, "Nah, I don't want him. He won't stand up for his own self. Why would he stand up for the team?" And I said, "Anytime." And that was it. We got in a major fight. He knocked me down a couple of times. I got up, and then I gave him a soccer kick where it would hurt any male. And I got on top of him, and I started digging my fingernails behind his eyeballs. I was going to pull his eyes out. And the whole team literally had to pull me off of him. And I went to my dorm room. And the coach came down and I said, Coach, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to embarrass you. I know you've been really supportive and you've helped me a lot. And he goes, John, the whole school was applauding that we've been waiting 3 years for this. He said, even the headmaster was in his office. I could see him in the window going like this.
Oh,
And he said, he looked at me and goes, you
no.
got a strange look on your face. What's going on in your head? I said, do you realize what you have just told me? He said, what? I said, you've convinced me the world is absolutely crazy. I have to do something physically violent to get respect instead of standing on my principle, not getting in a fight, letting this guy bully me for 3 years and putting up with it. And yet the only way I got respect from everyone is because I got in a fight with him. It made no sense to me. And he goes, you make a good point. The world is crazy. And we had a nice chat about it.
Wow. And just pushed to that limit, eh? That was it for you. And I guess John, you know, survivors watching will understand that too. There is a breaking point. We all have one, and what had led to all of that was almost unbelievable. And I'm so sorry you had to experience abject bullying. I'm talking about cadets now, military school, from adults. I
Yeah.
mean, that punishment and that evil physical um, type of discipline is just beyond acceptable. Ugh. Um,
Yeah.
so I guess for you, you know, as you emerged through all of that and you left school, what has helped you? What has helped you on your journey to recovery and overcoming all of this?
Well, I think it started, I think it started with Otis, then the coach at private school, and then my math teacher had me in his office. He said, I see you struggling a little bit with, maybe making friends and stuff here. I said, yeah, well, a lot of it doesn't make sense to me. He goes, well, math can make sense to you. I said, what do you mean? He goes, math is one of these things that nobody can argue with you. I said, what do you mean? He goes, 1 and 1 is 2. No matter what anyone says, 1 and 1 will always be 2. So if you do that on a test, nobody can say, well, subjectively, I think this and give you your opinion about it. There's no opinion. 1 and 1 is 2. And a light bulb went on. I said, okay, I'm in. Teach me more math. And so he did. And I wound up going through trigonometry, geometry. I mean, all of these advanced math classes because I felt something that made sense to me. There was an order in the universe, perhaps, square roots made sense to me. Triangles made sense to me. And I think that helped me later on when I got into filmmaking as a producer before I decided I would just wanted to write and direct. Um, because numbers didn't bother me because I knew they told the truth. So you put numbers in a category, you can shift it around, but they didn't bother me. So the bigger the number, I didn't care. It was just a number. So I think the mentoring with teachers helped. When I got to my first year in college, I actually started making some friends. I got into a chemistry class because I wanted to cure cancer because that's what my dad died of. My poor teacher took me for a walk one day. He goes, you know, you really like chemistry, huh? I said, I do. He says, why are you in chemistry? And I said, oh, here we go again. So I told him the story and he said, yeah, I had a funny feeling about that. He said, you do labs, 3-hour labs in 45 minutes and you beat all the other students. You're an A student in all of the classes, but I've already talked to the school. You're out of my class. I went, well, okay, time out. I'm really
What's happened
conflicted here.
now?
You just threw him out of chemistry after all his
Yeah,
accolades?
yeah.
And he said, yeah, you're not the guy with the pocket thing with the pens in it. He goes, there's something artistic in you you need to find. You just go find yourself. So I'm sitting in the grass and my friend Liz, African American gal, came in and said, what happened? I told her and she goes, well, can you help me today since you're not doing anything? I'm thinking I'm going to help her move furniture or something. And I said, yeah, sure. So she took me to the theater and she introduced me and I said, what are we doing here? I said, well, here's a book. Just read these lines. I said, I'm not an actor. She goes, no, just read the lines. It's fun. So I'm on the stage for about an hour, reading these lines. And I said to the director, hey, I got to go do my homework. He goes, you can't leave a rehearsal. And I looked at Liz. I said, and she goes, and so she said, well, he said, you've been cast as the leading man of the play. I went, oh, no, 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 no. I'm not an actor. He says, oh, yeah, 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 you are. And the whole cast came around and reassured me I could do it. And it was at that moment I thought, wow, maybe I found some people that I can resonate with here. They speak my language in a sense. And by the second year, I wrote and directed a play for Parents Weekend, and I just fell in love with the whole process of the creative, and that helped a lot too.
Wow, wow. So, it sounds like mentoring with having teachers mentoring was really helpful right from the time you were 11. Well, I'm including Otis, of course, because he was a life teacher, we can safely assume. But, you're also talking about finding a way to creatively express, which although was initially forced on you, became your kind of path, if you like. So
Yeah.
I guess what I'm looking for is our beautiful survivors watching sometimes are looking for ways to heal, and it's really valuable to hear the things that may have helped. So I guess, yeah. Well, anything else you would recommend to our survivors that worked for you that you would say, hey, try this?
A couple of things actually, and yes, a couple of things. Um, I think first you have to decide that it's your life, and nobody's going to change it except you. So when you open your eyes in the morning, look at it as a blank piece of paper, and you get to write your own script. You get to figure it out for yourself, do what makes you happy, and ignore the rest. I highly recommend therapy if that works for you. That really helps. I did journaling, which helps. And in my process of trying to figure out life, I created a 3-step life-changing program that has helped many people get over trauma because it's something that you can learn to deal with and overcome. And it's called Uncover, Discover, and Recover. And what this tool is all about is you uncover an issue you're facing. So if you're having like a depressive episode, you have to look at it and say, okay, what's going on here? What am I trying to figure out? So once you've identified what the issue was, you uncovered it. Now you have to discover whether or not your perception of the truth is true, or is there another truth to it? And you have to be honest with yourself and do that. Once you get to that point, then you're in the recovery, which is you take the baby steps that are necessary to move yourself forward. So I think combining that with getting up in the morning and doing simple tasks that you set, nobody else sets, like, okay, I'm going to make my bed 1 week in a row until it becomes a habit. Now, if you do nothing else in the day, you've accomplished something. So your mindset now changes from, I don't want to get out of bed. And when I do, I just want to brush my teeth and do something stupid. I don't want to do this. But you've accomplished something. And the physical act of accomplishing something triggers your mind to thinking positive thoughts instead of negative.
Oh,
And
I
I
love
think that
that.
that's, yeah, I think that's what I would tell all of the survivors out there. Um, please be kind to yourself. And when you hear people saying you got to forgive other people, no, you don't. What you need to do is forgive yourself. And once you start forgiving yourself, the rest falls in place.
So I think that's quite beautiful, John. And we know that you have been a 40-year veteran filmmaker and producer and director. Um, were you what are you kind of doing in this space or in your life, perhaps in the last 5 or so years leading up to now? Can you share a little bit about that with us?
I'd be happy to. If you don't mind, I'm going to go back just a few years earlier
Sure.
because I had an incredible lucrative career. I had developed quite a reputation. And then I had two children. And one night I came home because I would be getting up at 5 in the morning, coming home at 10. And I looked at my two little babies and I turned to my wife and I said, I'm going to find a different job. And she went, what are you talking about? You love filmmaking. You write, you direct, you produce. You can't just walk away from it. I said, Linda, I'm looking at my two kids and I'm about to repeat a pattern of them not having a father. And I'm not going to do that. So I went into post production for a while, several years actually. And the first job I got was through a friend of mine, and I became the vice president of the Walt Disney account for that post production facility. And so I spent a lot of time doing that, helping to raise the kids. They had a father. I went to every sporting event. If they blew their nose, I was right there to say, attaboy, yeah, and it was very cathartic and healthy for me because I was giving them something that I so wanted in my life. And later on, they said, Dad, you could have dialed back a little bit. So, and they knew my background. They said, but we understand. I said, well, okay, I appreciate that. Um, uh,
It's so powerful, John, and what a, even though it wasn't your intent, how healing for you is the fatherless child. I'm talking about the inner child. So how healing, and survivors, isn't it amazing how that can happen? We repair, don't we? Sometimes
yeah,
consciously, sometimes not. So I'm so thrilled you said that. I think that's
yeah.
beautiful. So your children grew up with a father.
They grew up with a father, and then when they got old enough, my wife um, turned to me and said, it's time. I said, what, bedtime? What time? I don't know. What are we talking about? She goes, you need to stop because I can see you're going to kill somebody in corporate America. You need to go back to being creative. And I said, the kids are at an age where they don't really need me anymore. I mean, they need me, but they're not
They're
babies anymore.
independent. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I went back in and I had to reboot my entire career, which it took me a couple of years. And financially, it was a big pain, but uh, I have a loving wife and supportive beyond words. And said, I don't care if we wind up in a teepee as long as the family's together. So I'm back in the saddle. I've got three projects in development. I've written six novels, several screenplays, and I'm working with a group out of Georgia on two projects. I've put a package together for a film called Christmas Voices from a novel I wrote because I feel that the moral compass of the planet's gone haywire, and I want to bring back some of those old world feelings about what really is valuable in life. So it's a modern day Scrooge type of story. So I'm pretty
Oh,
excited about it.
I love it. And you don't really sit still, do you? Not doesn't seem to be in your repertoire. And just so everybody watching knows, all of John's details are going to be included in the show notes, and I strongly encourage you to go and have a look. I think we're, amazing what you have managed to accomplish, and dare I say, having the outlet of creation and production, and the writing means that, it's all cathartic, whether or not we are aware of it. And often say to our beautiful survivors with such humility and love, I'm so proud of all of you, because however you find your way to express what you need to is perfect for you. And I love
Absolutely.
that. There's 150 different ways of expressing ourselves plus. So I love that. John, any final words before we close out today?
Um, yeah, for the survivors out there who are still searching, take a walk. I mean, go. If you live by a beach, go by the beach. If you live in the city, take a walk through the city and just be of the world. Don't try not to fall into the trap of I'm depressed, so I'm going to sit in this room and stay away from everybody. Make baby steps. You can't accomplish this overnight. And believe me, even when I was in the heyday of my successful career, I had moments that were depression, but I had to stop and use my tool. And I said, okay, what is the issue I'm facing here? What am I so depressed about? And it was all about self-worth. Am I doing enough? Can I do more? And I had to stop and say, you can't, you got an Emmy nomination, you got 8 other awards, you've recorded 12 songs with your friend who's a musician, you've written 6 novels. How much more do you have to do to prove you to see yourself that you're worthy?
Yeah.
And my wife said, about time you figured that one out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yay. Finally.
finally, so please be
Yeah.
kind to yourself and others. And if you see a fellow survivor in need, just be with them. You don't have to give advice. You don't have to talk about anything. Just sometimes just having another person next to you really helps a lot.
Yeah. No, I love that. Well, John, please just stay right there. Thank you. Audience, what a gift. Look at the wonderful learnings John has been able to provide us today, and a couple of things really leapt out at me, and one was this: decide that it's your life. Grab a blank piece of paper and write your own script.
There you go.
I love that. And then the other one was, take a walk, just be of the world. Sometimes as survivors, we just constantly move, try and achieve, we overachieve, we burn out, we recalibrate. Just be, I think, is the power. So thank you to everybody, especially our wonderful guest, John. And as we're closing off now, just from my heart to yours, I see you, I stand beside you, and I believe you.